I think as a creative person, if you want your ideas to see the light of day, you got to be relentless because it's too easy to shut them down. But for me, I'm like, nah, you're going to listen to me and we're going to make it happen because...
Today, I am joined by Jo Bird, who is creative lead at Lounge. She's also worked at Gymshark before. She's a TEDx speaker. She does creative coaching. What does this woman not do?
Gymshark was my personal creative renaissance in a way.
Okay.
Like it was that first job where I was like, all those skills are now coming together and it's Gymshark. It's called the IKEA effect. And it's essentially, if you help build it, you will love it. If somebody feels like they've been involved in that idea, they will naturally like it more. Just test this out.
Gymshark, Lounge, all of these amazing brands that have grown e-commerce and grown digitally are now kind of choosing to go offline and choosing to have stores, pop-up stores, all of that. Why? And what was kind of the creative process behind that?
There's no lingerie store like it, like at all. I hope the other lingerie brands are a little bit scared.
How do you get creative on a budget?
If I was to start my creative career all over again this year, I would...
Hello and welcome back to the Girls in Marketing podcast. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Jo Bird, who is creative lead at Lounge. She's also worked at Gymshark before. She's a TEDx speaker. She does creative coaching. What does this woman not do? I have no idea. I absolutely love this conversation, all about creative processes, creativity, branding, all things. Honestly, it was such a good conversation. Let's dive in. Thank you so much for joining on the podcast today, Jo. I would absolutely love to just start from the beginning. We love to start from the beginning. Tell me a bit about how you got to where you are now, this kind of career journey. What's happened? Like, where have you been? What have you done?
How long have we got in here? That's the big question. This question gives me anxiety because creative careers are just not, like it's not a 1 + 1 = 2 sort of situation. Like it's such a squiggly line. So trying to condense 10 years into 2 minutes is going to be tough, but I'll give it a go. So I studied photography. I've always been creative. My family's creative. It's my granddad was a magician. Like I've just grown up in this amazingly creative environment. So naturally I wanted to prolong that. And I went to university to just see how far I could go with it. So I got a degree in photography and then I was out in the big wide world with not a clue what I was going to do with it at all. And whilst my family are creative, they don't work in the creative industry. So for them trying to give me advice, it's kind of tricky, really. So yeah, I just had to sort of like figure it out, which is hard. And TikTok wasn't a thing, so I didn't have TikTok to look at. So I essentially, I did some awful jobs. I worked in telesales. I worked in the handbag department of a department store. I worked in a family portrait studio, photographing animals and kids, which the rumor is true. Do not work with kids and animals because it's a nightmare. I did all these crazy things. I got a job actually in a famous photography studio in London. That was one of my first grad jobs after those other ones. A Rankin studio, which is like celebrity fashion portraiture. It was like the devil wears Prada. Like that job was absolutely incredible. It was my first insight into the industry. I was literally running crazy errands. I was like buying crazy things from shops, like planning model birthdays. Like it was wild, but I was just a receptionist there. So I didn't have like a creative role, if that makes sense. So I moved back home, back to Birmingham, and I started as a graphic designer. That was my first, I want to say, proper job in the industry because it was the first time I had a job that required creative skill because to that point I hadn't actually flexed that. So it was amazing because I met a mentor and a best friend. She's still my friend now in that job. It's kind of funny because my surname is Bird and I worked at a chicken factory as a graphic designer, but it honestly was great. This girl that worked there, she took me on, she mentored me, she taught me everything that she knew about graphic design. I barely had a portfolio. And after, I think it was about a year with her, I fully understood hierarchy, typography, color, like everything that I had not learned at university. I now knew, which fills promise because you don't have to go to university to learn these things. You can learn them on the job. So she helped me build that credible portfolio, and I then got to have a job in a creative agency after that. Then I went freelance as an art worker, and then I took a slight detour and became a photographer's agent, which all sounds very random, but it was when I was a photographer's agent that I learned about art direction. So I was in London being a photographer's agent, and I was taking portfolios out to advertising agencies to show the creative work and meeting art directors. And when they started telling me what their job involved, I was like, yes, this is what I have been squabbling for the past, I think it was about 5-6 years throughout my 20s. So yeah, they explained what they did. My eyes lit up, butterflies in my stomach, and I was like, this is it. I was like, okay, but how am I going to get this job? Because they've all been doing it for years and I've been fumbling around. So I did what all confused 20-somethings do, and I ran away to Australia for 2 months because why not? And then when I came back to mum and dad's for the third time in 10 years, I was like, right, let's try this art direction thing. So I'm on Google looking for my next job, typing creative jobs Birmingham, and up pops this Gymshark company. I didn't have a Scooby-Doo who they were. It just so happens I've got a younger brother who's 7 years younger, and he was like, cool company. And I was like, oh, really? I just loved the job spec. It was art direction. So he was like, yeah, you want to get in there. So I applied. Best piece of advice he's ever given me. Got the interview, did a test project, and I loved the test project. It was everything an art director does, and I was like, this is it. Went in for the interview, which, fun story, they didn't actually confirm my interview, but I turned up anyway.
Okay.
Because I was like, I know I really want this now, and I don't want to phone in advance and give them the chance to say, oh, we've changed our mind. So I was like, I'm just going to turn up at HQ and they will see me.
As you might know, Hostinger is a sponsor of the Girls in Marketing podcast, and I want to tell you more about a project that I'm using it for at the moment. I needed to create my own professional website for a while now, but never had the time. Since I'm doing a lot more speaking and advising opportunities now, it's good to have a place to direct people to. If you've ever tried to build your own website, you know it can be, overwhelming. And I've been looking for something that is intuitive, flexible, and most importantly, can bring my vision to life without me needing to be a tech guru. That's exactly what Hostinger delivers. I decided to try out their AI-driven website builder, and it was seamless. I simply had to write up 3 sentences to sum up what I was looking for, and Hostinger does the rest. Its AI software offers personalized suggestions on layout, design, and even content, ensuring that my personal website not only looks professional, but also truly reflects my personality and ethos. It's been so empowering to see my ideas transform into a beautiful, functional website. What really stood out for me initially is the ease of customization. I can tweak every element to match my style, making my website a genuine representation of me and my work. So if you've been wanting to create a website for a while now, but not sure where to start with everything, I'd suggest giving Hostinger a go. It's user-friendly, powerful, and will give you the confidence to create a website that you can be proud of. Over this season of the podcast, I'll be updating you on the progress of my professional website, as well as telling you more about the features that Hostinger offers. For now, you can head over to hostinger.com/girlsinmarketing to try out their AI website builder for yourself. They're having a New Year sale until the 12th of February, so you can get your plan for £2.49 a month, plus an extra 10% with our code girlsinmarketing. Now, let's get back into the episode.
So I did, and they did see me. And I think just like my passion and energy, and like I talked through the work I'd done. They gave me a tour of the office. I actually asked for a tour, and they were like, "Okay, we'll show you." And then, they gave me a call back, and we're like, "Got the job." So I was like, "Bam." In. And from that point, I just didn't look back. Like, it was the right job for me that I had found. It was definitely the right one. I just sort of went from there. Yeah. So I said I was going to condense that down. I didn't manage it. I never have managed it. But I guess it's important for me to explain it's not very straightforward. Sometimes you just got to fumble around in the dark until you find something that clicks,
Yeah. And I think that is the case for so many people who work in that kind of creative, marketing, PR industry. Very rarely do people have that idea of like uni, like straight into your first job, absolutely love it, and Bob's your uncle, you are, CMO or, something like that. I think it's not always like that. It's so interesting as well that you kind of came from that like photography background, because do you think that sort of background really helped with where you are now and kind of the role, obviously, that you took on in Gymshark and then the role now that you have at Lounge? Do you really think that you utilise what you learned about photography and everything that you do within that degree to now your role?
Yeah, 1,000%. It's funny because in one of my early jobs, there was a creative director when I was doing graphic design. And I wasn't really the creative graphic designer. I was the very like technical art worker, and I was quite bored doing it. And he came over to my desk and he was like, "You want to do creative stuff, don't you?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Just remember I've said this. Every skill you learn now will be forever useful in this industry." And I remember thinking at the time, it's like your dad giving you advice. You're like, yeah, whatever. But it's so true. I've never forgotten those words. And I now say those words to my team. Every little element along that rocky road that I went through, whether it was telesales even, working in the handbag department, the photography degree, working in the fashion photography studio, like planning model parties, like all these random things have made me so much better at a creative role because they are just so character building, like all the elements that you need for communication and initiative. And this is creative skills. Like it's not something that's highly, highly technical. Yes, there are rules for certain things, but when you learn the rules, you break the rules. So that's kind of how it works. So for sure, everything has been incredibly useful.
Yeah. So your role now, tell me a little bit about your role at Lounge now. Like, what does that entail? What do you do on like a day-to-day basis? I feel like it's so hard with such a kind of broad role to say what you do on a daily basis, but I'd love to like dive into what you do right now.
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm creative lead at Lounge. And what that means is now I sort of lead a team there. So I have the responsibility of managing other creatives, which if anybody is listening and they're a creative manager, they know it's not the easiest job to manage creative people because a lot of what we do is so emotional. We put our heart and soul into our work, and yet we still work for businesses. So there's so often occasions where the work isn't right. It's not because you've done it wrong. It's because the business need changed or the brief changed or the budget wasn't there. And trying to compete with that emotion, not just of the team, but of my own constantly is like quite hard. My team are wonderful. Like they're self-sufficient. They do an amazing job. And I, the projects I work on, I try not to get as emotional about it anymore. I think that's what comes with creative maturity, but it's still hard. You can't forget who you are as a person and that you've put that into the work. So day to day, we'll have a creative brief come in, so whether it's for a product launch or a brand campaign, or whether it's pop-up store or something like that. And my team are the first ones to touch it. So we will have the brainstorms. We try to make the brainstorms super fun as well. And just throw all our ideas together. We work with the copywriter. She's amazing. The brand managers that sort of make sure that everybody's looking in the right places for what we need to achieve at Lounge. And then we'll put it all together in a presentation and pitch our hearts out to the rest of the business. And if everybody goes like, yeah, that sounds good, we then work with the relevant teams to develop that project. So our job as creatives is predominantly like, I describe it as like an orchestra and we're the conductors.
Okay.
It's like we have to be the ones that stand at the front sort of making sure that everybody's playing in time. Otherwise, the music on the page will not come out right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it could get squiffy.
Yeah.
But you have to do that in a way that everybody feels they're owning their own thing. Because if people don't feel empowered to work on a project, it's just not going to be great. They're just not going to want to make it happen for you or for themselves. So like an artistic conductor of campaigns, I guess.
Would you say then the kind of role your team has a kind of role in all the way through? So it's not just necessarily, I always kind of think, is it just at the beginning? Is it obviously not necessarily at the end, but does it, I have the idea here from what you're saying around orchestra that it's kind of the whole campaign. Is that kind of how it works with you guys?
That's for sure how it works for me. That's what I took from my role at Gymshark. I don't know if maybe I got a reputation for being someone that can't let go of all elements. For me, I can only do my best if I'm on it from start to finish.
Okay.
And that's I'm not a micromanager. Like, for sure, I'm like, oh no, you go do it. You can do this way better than me, this design or whatever. But I think unless you've got that level of consistency across the whole campaign from a creative point of view, I'm not looking at data and all that, that's the marketeers. But from a creative point of view, it's such a subjective thing that if I take my eye off it, it could suddenly pivot and go in a totally different direction. And then what I pitched at the start will not come to life. So then everybody in the business is going, this isn't what you said was gonna, happen. So I'm like, oh yeah, I took my eye off the ball. So I don't like doing that. So I nurture my team to hold the hand. It's you're not being overbearing. You're just holding the hand, you know?
I think as well with creativity and creative roles, people are very prone to kind of having the creative people, right? So they're always going to have the idea of, oh yeah, we've got all these ideas and amazing. And I think you as the lead, the creative lead, have got to have that eye on the ball in regards to the brief realistically. And okay, well, what are we actually achieving? I speak to so many marketers all the time. And it's kind of like, oh, I've got this idea and I want to do all these different things. And I say, okay, well, that's great, but what are your objectives? Where does it come back to the brief? It's amazing to have all of these ideas, but don't overexert yourself for one, but also don't think, okay, well, actually, I have the capacity to do this and I want to do this, but does it relate to the brief? And I think that as creative people and people in that industry, whether it's digital, creative, marketing, we get very sidetracked with new things, new opportunities and new things that happen naturally because we're in an industry that's forever changing. It's exciting. And I think I speak to so many people that are, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. And it's kind of like, yes, I understand, but focus on kind of brief and the objectives first of all. I'd love to dive in a little bit about your role at Gymshark then. So before obviously leading the team now where you are at Lounge, tell me a little bit about kind of the Gymshark role. So you had this role, you worked at Gymshark for 4 years. What was that? What was that like? What was the role like?
I feel like Gymshark was my personal creative renaissance in a way.
Okay.
It was that first job where I was like, all those skills are now coming together and it's Gymshark. So it was, I went in there I've really got to prove myself. You know how creatively you get a lot of imposter syndrome, and I walked in and I'm surrounded by guys. I never have a problem with that. I get on with guys really well, but it did put me on a bit of a, hold on a minute, I've got to show you what I can do. So yeah, it was very dynamic. It was very, from the get-go, Joe, sit down, here's your first brief sort of thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, how do I play this? And they gave me swimwear because I think the guys were just like, oh, we're not going to do women's swimwear anymore because Joe's here. And I think then they gave me International Women's Day. And I was like, I see a pattern.
Yeah.
I see a pattern here. But I was like, let me just own my space. So yeah, it was very much get the brief, come up with concepts, come up with ideas. Like I say, I was always a driver of collaboration. So I really quickly made friends with not just the copywriters and the producers, but also the marketing channels. The way that they kind of shot things before I got there was they just went out and shot content and then made it fit. Whereas I was like, I absolutely think we should be shooting with intention. So what, like you say, what are the briefs? What are the marketing briefs? Give us that before we go. And maybe I was a bit of a catalyst for more process. But I am a little bit of a strategic creative like that. I'm not, you get some creatives that are just absolutely wild with their ideas and you're like, where is your brain? It's crazy. I'm not that kind of creative. I think there's a real spectrum of creativity. And I'm a much more logical, I love a brief. I absolutely love a parameter. I'm let me play in that parameter. I love that. So I really tried to lock in on that at Gymshark and push that forward. And as I say about being the only girl, that was the case for majority of the time there. So at first I found it a little bit I had a chip on my shoulder and I was like, I think we should be more diverse. I think we should have more girls in the team. But after a while, I started to wise up to it and I was like, hold on. I can really leverage this, to be honest. It's an asset if you're the only something on a team. So I was like, I'm just gonna make it my thing. I loved working on the girly campaigns. Like I really loved it. I wasn't going to say sorry for that. So I did all the sports bras campaign. Like I really invested in it. I was part of the women's employee resource group. I planned a whole week of International Women's Day events by myself. Like I was just like, if I'm going to get dealt this card, I'm going to own this card. Mm-hmm. And people started to know me for empowered women's campaigns. Mm-hmm. And actually it's because of that I got phoned by Lounge to go to work there, because they were looking for a creative and it's an empowered women's brand.
Yeah.
So I know we'll get into brands at some point because it's a hot topic, but I think there was something to be said by, here's your lemon, mm-hmm. like make some damn lemonade. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did.
That's so exciting, because I think, you know, having the idea of I want to achieve something and do this thing because of something that I currently going through, or maybe the idea with you and the team. I think it's so nice to see you making the most of that. So often we are put in certain situations where actually we think, oh, I don't really know what to do in this situation. I am, a minority in this scenario, whether it's a team or even if it's just, level of seniority. I see a lot with marketers. Oh, I'm the only junior in the team, or I'm not head enough to head up these campaigns. And I think so many people feel kind of like, well, I don't have the qualifications. I am not the type of person that should be saying certain things or speaking up in certain meetings. So I love that you kind of leveraged who you are to speak up and to do the things that you wanted to do. Question then, what were some of your favourite campaigns that you worked on at Gymshark?
It's so hard. There are so many good ones. That's why I'm just so grateful to have had time there, because it really was an eye-opener to what a marketing and creative campaign could be. And I learned a lot. Like the world that I was in just before Gymshark was very traditional, advertising agencies, like big above the line campaigns. Gymshark was the opposite. Gymshark was run and gun, get some good content, make it different. And so often we would have tense conversations we had like a lab that we'd come up with creative ideas, and the CBO would be in there, and everyone is super intimidating to walk into there, quite new, loads of guys. And I'd just be like, oh. I think one of the project managers was a girl, and she was just a bit like me, like, what is going on in this room? But it really toughened me up to the idea of coming up with more disruptive ideas and thinking outside the box and all those kinds of terms. And I think off the back of that, I could say my favorite campaign was, there's a few, but one of them was probably in COVID. Awful time, but for Gymshark, it boomed. Like we were all working from home and working more than ever, because the creative problem was we need to launch products and we can't do photo shoots or create content because we can't leave the houses. So I had swimwear again. And we're like, we need to sell swimwear and nobody's going on holiday, Joe. Can you come up with something? I was like, yeah, okay, leave it with me. So I started thinking about those, those retro greetings postcards that you get on like holidays.
Yeah.
I was like, I love those postcards. I've always found them fascinating. And we came up with this idea of like greetings from, but instead of greetings from all these places, we turned places into puns based on your home. So instead of like Orlando, Florida, we did Florlando, and she's like lying on the floor and it was all illustrated.
Okay.
Instead of like Japan, it was Japantry, as in like back to your pantry, it's COVID. And then instead of like Portugal, we did like Portugal, as in you're sitting on your porch. And then we just spiraled in COVID, coming up with all of these puns, like Bahamas instead of Bahamas, like, and you're in the bath. Like, we just did loads of them. And it was just such a bonding experience with me and the copywriter. We were just having so much fun with it. So we did them as direct mail postcards. So on the back of them, we did a handwritten message from Gymshark just to say, like, we hope you're staying safe, staying home. Like, it doesn't matter where you wear your swimwear this year, like, just enjoy the moment sort of thing. So that sort of came full 360 and I really enjoyed that. Other than that, I did always like the Women's Day campaigns, and I did Pride as well. And I think the fact that they were such important campaigns and they really needed to shift the needle a little bit, and the brief was very much not to make money, it was to have a conversation. That's kind of hard. Like, nobody really wanted to touch them, not because they didn't care about the causes, but because it was like, we don't want to get this wrong. Whereas I'm the kind of person that's like, I'm going to have a go at this. I feel like I can have enough conversations with enough people. I care deeply. I resonate with some conversations. I feel like I can have a good go at this. So for Women's Day, we introduced a Changemaker grant. It was basically Gymshark's first grant that they gave cash out for local women in local communities that were facilitating fitness for people around them. So if they had like a local sports group or whatever, they could submit, and then we would get an external body of judges to pick the winners. And the cash prizes were like life-changing for some of these people. I think I loved that campaign because it wasn't like the disruptive campaign that was going to get like viral hits on TikTok. Most people didn't even really know that we did it. But for me to know that my creative job can have an impact on somebody's life, that to me is very fulfilling. That's probably a little bit selfish, but I think it works for Gymshark because they're known as being the community brand. So those sorts of pieces of work actually do very well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those are a couple of my favorites.
I definitely don't think impact and feeling like you've had an impact is selfish at all. I think it's so nice to get satisfaction from the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
I often feel that about Girls in Marketing and what we do, you know, when people have really good feedback, or even if people say, oh, I listened to the podcast and I really loved it. I love that. You know, I get like a sense of we've made an impact. We've helped someone, or we've given someone the motivation to do something that they may not have done before. I think it's not selfish at all to think like that. With your creative process then, because obviously you said about the swimwear, you turn that around. I would never have thought of that in a million years. It's super, super interesting, and definitely something that is a bit different, really kind of made the most of the situation, if you will. What's your like creative process? Maybe not necessarily in that department in terms of like just for a certain company, but how do you become creative? I always feel like I struggle sometimes with like creativity. So how do you feel like get in the mood and get those like creative juices flowing?
It is tough, I have to admit. People do ask me this a lot, and I think it really depends on like what I'm working on, or like what's on my mind at the moment, what my current situation is, all those factors. Like it's not, I think we have to talk about those because creativity is so emotional. I always say, because I coach and mentor a lot of creatives, it's so intrinsically linked to you as a person and your life that if you're having a bad day, it's going to have an impact on the level of creativity that you can put out. So I think that's a really important thing. But that being said, if I'm having a really bad day, I do not force it. Like I absolutely don't. Even if I've got a deadline, it's like the days that I've really worked hard, even when I'm not feeling good and I've stayed up to midnight because I'm like, no, I've got to get this done for tomorrow. I've put something on a page, been driving to work the next day, like with my brain just sort of clocked off, and the idea pings into my head randomly whilst I'm driving, listening to like Spice Girls. I'm just like, I stayed up till midnight, I got nothing, and now you want to hit me while I'm driving on the M42. Do you know what I mean? Like you kind of can't plan for it. But you can facilitate it. So I think for me, it's you are what you eat. From a consumption point of view, like rich media, what films are you watching? Like I've got a great friend, he's a creative director, and he's always telling me about new indie films. And I'm like, God, I would just never have thought to like go to the cinema to see an indie film. But he's like, have you seen this indie film? I'm like, oh yeah, I should go check that out. I'm obsessed with my dad's album vinyl collection because he's been collecting it for years, and I get him to talk me through, and his face is lit up because he's just like, oh my God, I get to tell you about my vinyl. And I'm just like amazed by the album art. Just really random things that you can tap into. Mm-hmm. I think to be a good creative, you have to be a real observer of life. And it's so much now, we're not observing life or just absorbing or taking it in. We're just so like busy scrolling, TikTok or our phone, which is cool. Like you can get inspo from there, but it's not the only place. Mm-hmm. And when you've got like a breadth of inspo, those dots start to connect, and that's where the trail of thought goes. Yeah. So I think just being open to the world, quite honestly.
No, I agree. And I love, they say sometimes your best thoughts come in the shower or in bed.
Always the shower.
Often I'll be sat in bed and I'll go, oh, that's a really good idea. Actually, I should do that. And someone said to me, which is not revolutionary, but it was for me at the time, just go on your phone dead quick and just like note tap it really quickly. I never used to do that. I used to think, oh, I'll think about it in the morning, but then the morning comes and you forgot it, or, you know, something like that. I would not recommend necessarily picking up a laptop or something, but definitely just noting something down it'll kind of be a trigger for you in the morning to say, oh, actually, I remember, you know, that sort of thing.
It's funny you say about sleep as well, because it's been proven. So there's the famous artist Salvador Dali, and I think it was Thomas Edison. They used to like hold something heavy in their hand while they were drifting off to sleep, so that when they dropped it, they could realize what they were thinking of creatively and write it down, because apparently in that space between conscious and subconscious is where your most creative ideas happen. So they would try and actively probe it out of themselves. I'm not recommending anybody try this, because I don't know for sure if it works. I've not tried it. But it's this idea of when you're not trying, actually your brain is doing the work for you. And I find that fascinating. Think of how much in your everyday that you're on autopilot, like when you're walking, showering, driving, whatever, you're on autopilot and your brain is doing the creative work for you. I think we forget how powerful it is. Like, we really forget how powerful it is. So if we can find ways, like you say, to just quickly note it down when it pings, we can actually really leverage our subconscious mind. I think that's crazy, but like so cool.
Yeah. How do you feel like when you do have those moments, how does that transfer to creativity and processes? Because I will have those moments and often it'll be, okay, well, I've got this idea and I want to do it, but how do you kind of like make that happen? Or is it often that you'll have a creative thought about something that's going on? Or maybe if you do have a creative idea, do you then think, okay, well, I'm going to go in and chat to the team about it? Like, do you think about it more first? Do you plan it out and then do you put it out there? How does that work for you?
I get overexcited when I like an idea, and my team, they really made me laugh the other day, because I'm very obvious when I'm not interested in an idea. Like, I'll just sort of sit there and they're like, your face is saying it, or you're not into this. And I'm like, yeah, no, seen better. But then when I like something, they're like, we can tell when you like it. Because I'm like, guys, got this idea. And they're like, okay, cool, we heard you. And I'm like, no, I really think it's a good idea. And they're like, okay, we heard you the first time. But I'm like, but no one's partying like I am. So I'm going to go again. And I'm like, guys, really good idea. I just don't let it go. And at top level, that's kind of amusing, drives them mad, but kind of funny. But I really think that comes down to my core and everything I said to you about me trying to find this creative job and not giving up. I do not stop. Like, I am relentless. And I think as a creative person, if you want your ideas to see the light of day, you got to be relentless, because it's too easy to shut them down. It's too easy for you in your own brain to go, oh, that's a bad idea actually, or for someone else to not get it and then for you to go, yeah, you're right, it's a really rubbish idea. But for me, I'm like, nah, you're going to listen to me and we're going to make it happen, because I don't know, unless you back it, like, what's the point? If you don't back it, it's clearly not a good enough idea. That's my theory.
You've got to be your own biggest cheerleader, haven't you?
Absolutely. If I'm convincing about my idea, you sure as hell can guarantee that everybody else is going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, let's hear you. If I'm a bit like, oh, no, yeah, maybe it's not that good, then everyone else is going to drop off. So bit of conviction, Yeah.
Do you feel like when your team are maybe a bit more relentless, do you listen to them more? And actually, because that's the way you are, do you think, oh, actually, maybe I will think about it more, or maybe we will try and make it work? I feel like I'm always like that. Sometimes I will think, oh, I don't really think that'll work. But if someone's so determined to say, no, actually, I really think this will work, it kind of makes you second guess and think, actually, this might work.
Oh yeah, I'm creating monsters in my workplace. Like when I first got there, I think because I was new and I was creative lead, they were very like, oh, okay, like if Joe sort of says like that, then maybe it's not a good idea. But then over time, they've observed that I'm quite relentless. And now they challenge me and I'm like, whoa. But I'm almost like, actually, I really respect you for pushing back on that. And I really respect you for sticking by your idea. And I can see that they're getting more confident as well when they realize that they can back an idea. And I really respect that. I see what I've given them there, and I wish someone had given me that sooner. I think I would have got a lot further, a lot quicker if I had more belief in myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. They back their ideas, they challenge me, and I can't say anything about it because I taught them.
I love that. And for a lot of people, we've spoken about it on the podcast before, we say, you've got to always ask why. You've got to understand why. No one, for me, if someone says no to me, I'm like, well, why? And if they've not got an answer, it's like, okay, well, what do we do now? Why again? We've said so many times, say why in a nice way. You're not always going to just say why, really, just dead strict. Why?
Like a toddler.
Yeah. Why? Like throw your toys out the pram. Realistically, like, okay, well, I understand your point, but why can't we do this? Or why can't we experiment with it? And more people, I think it builds that confidence as you do it, as you mature, but equally as you kind of go through your career, you start asking more questions. And that equally means that people then realize that they're not necessarily just going to say no to you because actually you're going to ask them why, and then maybe they don't know. I think it's difficult, and I don't know if you've got any advice, but sometimes I speak to people who say, I, maybe have stakeholders or kind of managers within the company that I work for, and they have certain ideas or ways they want to do things. And I'm really creative and I really want to do things my way or do this new idea, but they're not listening to me, or they're not bothered about an idea, or they write me off. What would you say to them people? Like, how would you approach that situation if a stakeholder or a manager is saying, no, I don't think that idea is good? What would you say for them to do?
I've got this theory. I didn't come up with it. I found it online, and when I read it, I was like, this is the best thing I've ever read. It's a bit of consumer psychology. I've got really fascinated by consumer psychology recently. It's called the IKEA effect. And it's essentially, if you help build it, you will love it. So, with flat pack furniture, you build it yourself. So you've got like an affinity to that cupboard because like your heart went into that. I'm a single girl. I built everything myself. I look around my house. I'm like, I smashed that. I love it because I built it. This applies when you are trying to pitch a creative idea or trying to be seen and heard creatively. If somebody feels like they've been involved in that idea, they will naturally like it more. Just test this out. I advise everybody to give it a try because the minute I started doing it, everything just became so much easier. So what I do is I will do my creative idea. I will get it to a place that I feel like, yeah, this is what I want to present. I will present it, but rather than like a yes or no presentation, like, do you like it or do you not? I try to make it conversational. So it's like
collaborative.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's almost like, I know I've put this idea forward, but what do you think? Because so many people pitch and they don't ask, like, what do you guys think? Like, genuinely, what do you guys think? I think that comes from a place of fear, imposter syndrome, bit defensive, bit immature. I think when you can cross that bridge and get confident enough to be okay with saying, what do you think about this? And someone saying, I'm not sure about like this element of it actually, but I'm sort of thinking more like this. And for you to have enough integrity to go, okay, it's not what I originally thought, but let me simmer on that for a minute and see what we can do here. What you'll find is if you take that away, infuse a little bit of them into it and take it back to them, chances are you are going to get the go ahead so much easier. I've got multiple examples of when I did it. Like, I'm not going to say where and when and what it was, but I did a whole presentation that I'd worked a very long time on. Big virtual Zoom thing with all chiefs, heads, everything. And it was a big project and I left no stone unturned. I'd been so thorough with that concept, research, everything. Present it thinking, I got this in the bag. They'll say, yeah, like crack on. They were like, no, absolutely not. This is not it. Like, no, this won't resonate in this particular territory. And like, no. And I'm dying at this point. I'm a senior and I'm dying. And I'm like, my God, this is so embarrassing. This is awful. Why do they hate it? I don't get it. But it was the IKEA effect. It was because this entire team had not had a print on this work and they just didn't feel an affinity to it. So I took a bit of their feedback that I was sort of, in my mind, like, about, shuffled the slides, put a couple of keywords that they'd said in, like some buzzwords, represented it the next week. And they were like, yeah, it's awesome. Like, go ahead. And I was like, guys, I barely changed anything. Like the concept was the same. I just added some buzzwords and flicked the slides around.
Yeah.
But they felt psychologically like they'd been heard. And that is as simple as it is.
Okay. It's interesting as well, because when you are dealing with kind of more senior people, with founders or CEOs, I think because as well, they will have the IKEA effect to the business and their idea.
Yeah.
You know, if you're speaking to a founder or a CEO, if it's a small company, we have a lot of people in our community who work for small brands, you know, they're one-person marketing teams or they're small marketing teams. They work a lot with CEOs and with founders. Those CEOs and founders feel so passionately about what they've built as a business that this marketer comes along, has these ideas, and it kind of feels like stepping on toes a little bit. And it's kind of like what you said, get those people involved in the process of, okay, how do we build out this campaign so it works for the business, for our mission, for our vision, and for our purpose, and get them involved with those questions. I absolutely love that. And I think as a founder as well, I love when my team do that because I feel invested, I feel involved as well. I think it's about allowing yourself to have the idea that you might be rejected initially. Again, love the fact that you kind of were rejected in that example and you came back and you were like, let's try this again. A lot of people kind of feel deflated after that and they don't want to try again. So sometimes it's just about getting back up and trying again and presenting it a different way or doing it, you know, someplace else. I remember a good few years ago when I was working full time, I went for a role at a non-profit organisation. I've told this story on the podcast before, so I won't bore people with it. And I was rejected from the role because they said I was too analytical or too creative and not analytical enough it was. And I was really gutted. And I kind of was like, I am creative. You're saying was it analytical or creative? I can't remember, but it was one or the other. And I was like, I'm both. I love to be both. So I went back and I was like, I'm not being rejected, you know, as you do. And I said, I'd love like further feedback because for me, that wasn't enough for me to be able to go on and, you know, do better things and improve. And I say so many times to people, always ask for further feedback if you can. And it's the same with campaigns, with creative processes, with everything. Never just take a first, okay, we're not doing this because one sentence answer. We're not doing it because we don't have the budget. Well, okay, let's go a little bit further. What is the budget? What can we do with that budget? And that sort of thing. And I love what you said about, you know, kind of going stakeholders, getting them involved in more stuff and having that as like a full process in itself. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Lounge and the pop-up stores because there was one in Liverpool. Love it. I seen it. I messaged you. I was like, I've seen the pop-up store. I absolutely love it. Tell me a little bit about that and how that came about because Lounge has been an e-commerce brand. It's so interesting. And I know we chatted about it before that brands such as Gymshark, you know, Lounge, all of these amazing brands that have grown e-commerce and grown digitally are now kind of choosing to go offline and choosing to have stores, pop-up stores, all of that. Why? What is the reasoning and what was kind of the creative process behind that?
I know, it's wild. Like everybody's like, do you know what? We're going to make retail good again on the high street. Let's go. Obviously Gymshark did. That project started while I was still at Gymshark as well, which was super exciting for their Regent Street store. And they've just announced as well a second in London, which is super exciting. But for me at Lounge, I got there. I think I was like a month in and my boss came over to me so casually. She was like, so we're thinking of going into retail, like high street retail. And I was like, oh, I'm thinking like it was just like pie in the sky. We're going to do some research. She was like, would you put some like ideas together for what a Lounge store would look like? And I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to. So I don't do things by halves. So I'm like, I'll do some mood boards, but I will also do like a ton of other stuff. So I did like research, all about like incorporating like digital into stores, like what the bra fitting situation was on the high street, because all I think of is cold hands at M&S. And I'm just like, no offense, M&S. But I was like, there's got to be ways that we as a young brand can innovate a little bit. Like it can't just be a store. Like we're going to have to take it to another level. So my creative brain is going like overtime. So I put this whole presentation together of like the aesthetic, but then these like experiential touch points. And I pitched that to my boss and she's like, yeah, like this is really cool. And she put some bits in and we were like, let's take this to the CEOs. So she took it to the CEOs and I'm thinking like, I've not been here for long. So I'm assuming they're going to, you know, it was the easiest sign off of my life. I sat in that room and they were like, Joe, this is exactly what we had in mind. And I was like, really? And they were like, yeah, like really? So I'm like, okay, what happens next? And they were like, well, we're already looking at premises. And I'm like, oh, I thought this was just a research project. And they're like, no, we're looking at premises, and we're not just looking at one either. And I was like, okay, how many are we looking at? And they were like, at least like 4 in the next few months. And I'm like, whoa, okay, cool. So lo and behold, like literally a couple of months later, I can't believe the speed in which that team got those stores live. We had an incredible guy at a company called Imaginize that took the mood boards that we did and turned them into the renders. That was magic. That was like seeing like a vision. You know, like I say about the orchestra thing, that was like somebody taking that and bringing the music to life. And I was like, whoa. And then I got to go down to the first store launch in London. And it was so funny because it was up till the last minute of getting it ready. So I walked in on that morning and we had a press event, and all I could see was people still painting walls. And I was just like, oh my God. So I'm just like hands and knees, like putting underwear in drawers and like helping fix the place up. I didn't take a second to stop and look around at like this incredible space. And it was only after the press event that we were showing people around that I actually stopped and went, oh, like we all did a really good job here. Like it's stunning. There's no lingerie store like it, like at all. I hope the other lingerie brands are a little bit scared. We've innovated. We've made it breastfeeding friendly. So if you're a mom and you just need somewhere to go on the high street, you just walk in and they will know that they put you in the fitting room, which by the way is like a luxury bedroom. Like it's stunning. And you can have as long as you want in there. You've got little iPhones on every bust to show you what the bra looks like on different models. Just so much stuff that's so simple, but actually like goes a long way for a girl that's trying to buy herself lingerie, because it can be an intimidating experience. So yeah, just a bit of a crazy genie out the bottle moment, to be honest with you, but as ever, just throw yourself in because you don't know where it's going to lead. Yeah,
it's exciting as well that you kind of took that and ran with it and kind of made all those mood boards and said, this is what I think. And because often we kind of, I don't know, in that instant, and maybe you didn't because you thought it was a research project, but in that instant, did you feel a bit like, oh, this is a bit imposter syndrome? Like, I've never done this before, or I've never done it in this capacity before, or did you not really feel like that because you didn't really know what it was? How did you feel?
It's weird because at Gymshark, when they started doing the retail project, I was actually helping put some mood boards together for that. They asked us to, but then the project got taken off our hands and it went external, and some other collaborators, and that all went live, and it was incredible. They did such a good job, but I think I had like an unresolved, I want to do some IRL stuff. I want to take my creativity offline, and I need that project. I need to do that. It's just so weird that I got into that next job and a month in, it landed on my lap. And that, I think that for me was more like, nobody else is having this, I'm having it.
Yeah.
So a little bit of selfish, like I need to prove that this is my project and that I'm going to run with this. So I was like, just pull it out the bag, just do it.
So pop-up stores, expensive, like for smaller brands, and don't get me wrong, amazing, but it is very like high budget stuff. What would you say is a really good kind of creative thing that people can do that is cheaper? Like does creativity have to be expensive with marketing? Because I think as much as it is amazing, and massively hats off to you and the Lounge team for putting that on, it's so expensive. And
don't remind me. The CEO kept reminding me on how expensive the aesthetic was. He's like, we've gone over budget with this aesthetic. I was like, I know, but you get what you pay for, and it looks great.
Yeah. So how would you say approaching maybe a smaller budget thing, or I know you've kind of worked previously as well, how do you approach smaller budget creative stuff? How do you get creative on a budget?
Content marketing, like all day long. Like any of the marketing gurus say, you will know your Seth Godin's, your Chris Do, absolute idol of mine. I love the content he puts out. Even Gary V, the OG, they will tell you this is the landscape. Like you do not need money to get on a phone, make a little TikTok, upload it. Look at the brands that have gone viral with just real low budget, rough and ready, authentic content. Like you do not need these big budgets. And it pains me. Like as a woman of craft from my degree of photography, like I went into Gymshark like, no, we have to do everything like polished and beautiful and shoot on this camera and like cinematography. And they were looking at me like, we don't have to do that. Like impact over effort. And they kept saying it and it used to drive me mad. And one day I was like, damn, they were right. Like, like it's so true. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a real place for craft and beauty and I will always love that. And I think brands like Jacquemus who create these beautifully crafted, experiential, very high budget, beautiful stuff. There's a place, it can go viral. It's all worth it. But if it's just you, your small business and a phone, you can create some incredible content and it will do just as well, if not better.
And I think, when you don't have a budget, it's almost like you even more creative because you don't have the money to play with really as
100%.
well.
We were talking about this the other day. When you do have a brief and you do have parameters, instead of being creative like all the way around, you're creative in a more focused line. And actually that means you can go further because you're not trying to look all like everywhere for the idea. You're just looking here. So that those boundaries are like perfect for like getting to the result quicker. I love a parameter. Someone says to me like, your brief is you've only got £50 or your brief is everything in the creative has to be blue. Like I'm like having a field day. That just makes me so focused. If they say, oh, we just need an idea for like, I don't know, this t-shirt. I'm like, oh, give me a clue. Like, give me some structure. Creatives love structure. They just will never admit it.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it for them.
Yeah. And the thing is as well, as you said, it's a spectrum, isn't it? There's people that are maybe like yourself, more strategic. Some people who love that creative freedom. And I think it's leaning into what you know and learning about yourself so that you can utilize that to your advantage from a marketing and a creative perspective. If you are someone, like you said, who knows you like that, the parameters, you like the briefs, then try and get that. But if you don't, go into it and say, I am someone who really prefers to have that creative freedom. I really like just scrolling and seeing and whatever happens, rather than parameters. But if you love parameters, go in and say that. And I think that as well shows that you know yourself and you know how you can do well at a role or within a company.
100%.
I think it's so important to do that. Creativity then, you did a kind of talk with our members about the 3 C's of creativity. Let's dive into that a little bit. What are the 3 C's of creativity and how do you utilize them and how does that play in your kind of role or everything that you do within creative?
So we touched on it already. So the first one is consume. So like consume, you are what you eat, rich media, like explore the world. Like, and that doesn't mean you have to go traveling to Bali and go find yourself. Like it doesn't mean that. It just means look at things that you wouldn't usually look at or things that you think you don't like. Just pay attention to them. Because I think you can get really inspired in the most obscure places. I was walking down the road here on the way and there was like a guitar shop with the most like incredibly, like everything was so shiny. And I was like, I've got to take a picture of this. Collect those references. That's not a C, but I've just thrown it in there. So yeah, consume, collect the references. The second C is connect dots. So when you've got this sort of like backlog of references and things that you've found, whether it's from the brief that you've been given and the brand that you're looking into, or whether you've just been out and about in town, or whether you've been looking at your dad's vinyl records, connect all these dots and it's like a ginormous jigsaw puzzle on a table that you've just got to move the pieces around to see which ones fit. And you actually have some little happy accidents in that process that you're like, that I know that doesn't fit, but damn, it's interesting. Like that's, the brand collabs that keep happening, like Greggs and Crocs and crazy stuff like that. Like that's where it gets really interesting. And then the third C is create. So I think so many people overthink, over-engineer, like, oh no, and they're trying to put it in a deck to present and they're like, oh, I can't articulate this and I can't do this, and they're not going to sign it off. Like, just get your hands dirty. Like, go and do a run and gun like TikTok of this idea and just see what happens when you put that with that, or like do a quick mock-up and just see how it looks. I think you've got to go through the process of iterating, like trying, failing, trying again, failing, to get to where you want to go. Just so many people are just scared to get their hands dirty because they don't like the idea of being proven wrong. But the sooner you're proven wrong, the sooner you can be proven right.
Yeah. I honestly could talk about this all day.
I know,
genuinely.
it's so much fun.
What advice, this was one of the questions I wanted to ask anyway. And I think I could literally carry on forever chatting. But what advice would you say for those people who want to kind of have a creative career or be more creative? What would you say to people?
I love this because I made a TikTok about it this morning. I'm going on TikTok. It's really scary, everyone, but I did this exact thing. My advice to you is to build your personal brand. Like, I know it's cliche because it's the hot topic at the moment, but if I was to start my creative career all over again this year, I would for sure start building my personal brand. The reason being is because where CVs were very traditional, like you've got to have this credible background and try and get your foot through the door, it's so oversaturated now that really good creatives aren't getting seen and heard because quite literally the CV send, it just isn't making it through the automated system, or you've got one person in an office that just is having a bad day and they're like, no, I don't like your name. Like there's so many unconscious biases at play with that setup. I just think it sucks. Whereas if you're building your personal brand online, like actually we have done, which is how we've connected, and so many other opportunities have come up for me, you're actually just serving people your truth and your passion and your work and allowing them to sort of find you. Mm-hmm. And I think what happens then is the right people gravitate to you, the people that actually resonate. And the reason we could probably sit in a room for like 4 hours and chat about it because we understand. Mm-hmm. I think that can help with job seekers in creative because really, it's not about your CV and your history. It's about your work. And if you're sharing your work online, like your content marketing, but your own work, you're going to get seen. Like there's no doubt about it. If you're good or if you show promise, you will get seen. You will get noticed. Yeah. So I would just be all over that. I don't know if it's YouTube, TikTok, I'd just get on there.
How do you overcome the fear though? Because you've built your brand now to like, you know, over 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. That's kind of where you are at the moment. I know obviously you said TikTok, which is exciting. How did you overcome the fear? Because I often get fear like with LinkedIn. I love it. I love it as a platform and I love posting, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know how I feel, you know, and it's the not necessarily imposter syndrome, but like the fear of posting or the fear of people not liking what you post or people judging what you post or people taking what you post the wrong way. How do you kind of overcome that?
I have had a few trolls. I'm not going to lie. I've had a few trolls. I block them. Just get rid. No, there is a fear to it. For sure there is. The reason I snowballed and got over the fear very quickly is because I basically was coming from a place of genuine authenticity. Like when I first started posting, I think I was just sharing my work. Like I was literally like, what's to be fearful about? I got this project I was really proud of. I uploaded it, put the tag, like the credits of the team on. And then I was like, but I also put a little caption with it to be like, really love working on this. Like, you know, and then I was like, hold on a minute, there's people liking this. Then I asked for a mentor on LinkedIn. So then I had loads of people commenting. And I was like, you know, just little drip feeding bits of confidence. And then I put a post about like the next project. And then I put a bit more about me. And people were like, oh, that's really inspiring, Jo. And it always just coming from a place of like genuineness. Mm-hmm. I think if you love what you do, and you're not doing it for ill intent, like, I just want to be famous. Mm-hmm. That's when you open the gates to being torn down. But if you're like, no, I genuinely just want to show people what I can do with this illustration stuff I do, why are you fearful? Mm-hmm. Just, you've got a talent, like share it. You know, you are going to help someone that hasn't even got that far. Mm-hmm. And when I write, people always say to me, how do you come up with posts every day of the week? I write to my younger self. That is literally it. Like, I'm like, Jo, 10 years ago, what the hell did you need to hear, gal? I'm like, right, Jo needed to hear this today. Yeah. And then it just so happens to help other people. Like, cool. Mm-hmm. But really, it's just helping old young Jo out.
Yeah. And also it's, you know, kind of like reflecting on experiences, you know, as you said, posting about things that you're proud of, but equally saying, you know, this could have went better, or I wish I would have done this earlier or sooner. Or, you know, I did a post not long ago about launching a podcast, and I said, you know, I failed launching our podcast 4 years ago, and now we're back, we're bigger than ever because we put our heads together as a team and we decided like, right, how are we going to create the most impact? So it's not also just about the successes. So many people post about the successes. I often feel like the posts that people love and reach out to me about are the failures, which I don't know if that's great or not.
Same.
But the people, they reach out and they say, oh, I love this post about this failing or that failing. I'm like, great, everyone's going to think I'm a failure. Amazing. But I love that because they're like, no, I resonate. I feel, I tried this or I've done this in the past and actually, it didn't work out for me. And I love the fact that it's for you, it's not just always about the success and anything like that. And when I set out Girls in Marketing, I was so fearful at the beginning of showing my face, being a part of the brand. And now, years later, I am like here hosting the podcast. And I think that is come over time. And I think as well, we are our own worst critics. So something that I always say to people is don't put yourself down. If you are putting yourself out there, first of all, do it because you want to do it. As you said, that place of authenticity, but equally do it when you feel you've got the time. Because that was another thing I was going to say. How on earth do you do what you do with your schedule, full-time creative lead at Lounge and also posting all the time on LinkedIn and now TikTok? How do you do it? Are you good at time management? You must be.
I don't have a boyfriend and I don't have kids. Genuinely. I'm joking, kind of. I batch do it. So for me, I don't know why when I started, I didn't know that was a thing. And I was doing it every morning. I'd get up early before I drove to work and I would sit. Nobody teaches you this stuff. And I'd sit trying to write a LinkedIn post and I was like, oh, this is exhausting. And then I learned about batch. So I just spend like a half a day on a weekend. It does help that I'm a single girl, like, to be honest, because I don't spend my time like, looking after children. But I spend time, I batch do it. To be honest, I love it that much. Even if I had a family of my own, I would probably just stay up late on a night and just like get it all done on a night. It's my me time. So yeah, schedule it and it just pings out during the week. And then I just spend a bit of time in my lunches or on an evening when I'm watching like good TV, like The Traitors and Love Island. And I will just reply to a few comments and engage because that's the other half of it that people don't realize. You don't have to just post. You can just encourage other people's posts and cheerlead, and that's equally as effective actually. So I just spent a bit of time doing that. So it's actually not as hard as people think. It's really not. I think if you want it, you tend to make time for it. I can't make time to go to the gym at all, but I can for sure make time to write LinkedIn posts.
Yeah. I think a first step, amazing advice is start commenting, start engaging, start seeing what other people are doing. Don't think, oh, this is so overwhelming. I want to post on LinkedIn. I want to build my personal brand. Okay, I'm going to create content for the next 6 months. Like start with engaging, start with just liking a few posts, commenting. There's so many people that I've spoken to within our community that just start like that. They start just commenting on people's things. And then eventually you build that confidence up where people are like, I'd love to hear more about your experiences, your story, the campaigns that you work on. And then you can kind of get to that. I think sometimes we often want to jump, in the deep end, really.
Everybody wants instant results.
Exactly.
It doesn't work.
It's not going to happen. And I think instead, starting small, starting realistic, set yourself smart goals.
Absolutely.
Smart goal, girly, you've got to be. And when you say to yourself, okay, well, I'm going to build up more confidence and eventually you will be able to post.
It becomes second nature. Like
exactly.
Definitely. Be in it for the long game. Like consistency is more important than the quantity of your content to start with, 100%.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that is a really good note to finish on. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
I have absolutely loved this conversation. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Girls in Marketing podcast. It was a good one, wasn't it? If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and rating of the podcast and share it with someone who may find it useful. Your support really does go a long way. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, but in the meantime, keep up to date with Girls in Marketing over on social media and our website. We'll pop some helpful links in the description.